Hello everyone, let's just study about the anatomy of the eyeball today. So here we can see the gross structure of the eyeball. So it is cystic in structure due to the pressure inside it, and it has two poles, that is anterior pole and the posterior pole. The anterior and the posterior pole are the central point on the maximum convexities in the anterior curvature and the posterior curvature. Okay, so here we can see in this picture, this is the anterior pole here, and this is the posterior pole. So the anterior curvatures central point and the posterior curvature central point are the posterior pole and the anterior pole. Okay, and the equator is the midline between the two poles. The anterior posterior diameter of the eyeball is 24 millimeter, while its horizontal or transverse diameter is 23.5 millimeter. Its vertical diameter is 23 millimeter. Its circumference is 75 millimeter. Its volume is 6.5 ml, and it is 7 gram in weight. Okay, so let us talk about its coats now. So for its coats, we have three coats here, which is fibrous coat, vascular coat, and the nervous coat. So at first, let us talk about the fibrous coat. In fibrous coat, we have anterior 1/6 and posterior 5/6. Anterior 1/6 is transparent, while the posterior 1/6 is opaque. The anterior 1/6 of the fibrous coat is also known as cornea, while the posterior 1/5/6 of the fibrous coat is also known as sclera. Okay, and the junction between the cornea and the sclera is also known as limbus. So conjunctiva here is firmly attached to the limbus. Secondly, we have vascular coat. This one brown here is the vascular coat. In vascular coat, the function of this coat is to supply nutrition to the various structures of the eyeball. So we have three parts here, which is choroid, ciliary body, and iris. We also call this vascular coat as uveal tissues. So here we can see this is the iris, here this is the ciliary body, and then we have choroid here. Then after that we have nervous coat, which is retina, which is concerned with the visual function and projects to visual cortex through the visual pathway. So again, now let us talk about the anterior and posterior chambers and anterior and posterior segments of the eyeball. So first we have anterior segment and then posterior segment. Anterior segment includes crystalline lens. Okay, so we can see here lens, and then other structures in it um, are cornea, iris, cornea, iris, and the two aqueous humor fill space, which is anterior chamber and the posterior chamber. So structures anterior to this lens is known as anterior segment, while the structures posterior to this lens is also called as posterior segment. So in anterior segment we have these structures, and in posterior segments we have retina, choroid, and optic discs. And now about anterior segment, we have two chambers, anterior chamber and the posterior chamber. Anterior chamber is bounded anteriorly by the posterior surface of the cornea and posteriorly by the iris and the ciliary body, while the posterior chamber is bounded anteriorly by the posterior surface of iris and ciliary body, while it is bounded posteriorly by the lens. Anterior chamber is slightly shallower in hypermetropes and deeper in myopes, but is almost equal in two eyes of a same individual. It communicates to the posterior chamber through the pupil, and the posterior chamber is triangular in shape. So about posterior segment, it lies posterior to the lens and consists of vitreous humor, which is a gel-like material which fills the space behind the lens, and it also consists of retina, choroid and optic disc. This is all about the anatomy of the eyeball.